You're listening to The Capital Table. Private capital markets have been evolving for many years, but never more so than in recent times. Take a seat at the Capital Table with leading experts discussing insights into the private equity and M&A worlds, and take away the knowledge you need to excel in a rapidly changing marketplace. We know this is one table you'll leave feeling full and satisfied.
Thanks for joining us at this issue of the Capital Table. Today we're going to talk about IT due diligence. I'm Steve Brady, the market leader for transaction advisory here at Withum. Pleased to have joining me today Daniel Cohen-Dumani, the market leader of our digital and technology transformation practice, and as well Max Herve, lead consultant in that practice. So, certainly as we are working with, private equity firms and strategic buyers alike, the importance on IT due diligence is becoming more and more prevalent, the pace of things changing. And as we see it from our practice, smart buyers are really addressing these issues, but many still shortcut the due diligence process. So excited to talk with Daniel and Max about this topic. So Daniel, let's start with why IT due diligence is important.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining today. So IT due diligence is becoming, and it always has become important from our perspective. For those firms out there looking to acquire organization with the complexity of technology, the ever presence of technology in everything we do, there's a growing need to ensure proper due diligence. And, more often than not, we've seen many organizations taking IT due diligence lightly. And what we mean by that is just taking an inventory of what the acquiring company own is not enough, right? You need to spend some time going under the hood, looking at the type of technology infrastructure that your acquiring company own, and what kind of infrastructure exists either on premises or in the cloud. And as more companies are moving to the cloud, understanding what's out there, how they subscribe, if they own on-premises system, what licenses they have, and go deeper into understanding the applications that are used, the content, the data, the processes around the system used day to day, not just for mission critical operation, but for all operations. As we see many companies becoming heavily dependent on technology and its ability to perform, ensuring that you have a great grasp and understanding during due diligence is critical. And what's going to be important during that process is to keep in mind to understand the current state, but also start thinking ahead about what is it going to take to integrate. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time today speaking about integration, because obviously if the acquisition is successful, there'll be an integration period of moving that technology infrastructure. Back in the days, we had servers, so you could just physically move the servers and everything was good. I think today it's more complicated. Everything is somewhere hosted, somewhere in the cloud, and there's no sometimes any servers to move, right? There's content and services to be migrated.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And, I guess as we drill into this topic a little bit more, and Max, as you focus your IT due diligence efforts and many of the projects that you've worked on, tell us a little bit more about those areas of focus and, leading into the integration stage.
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Max Herve here. I work closely with Daniel and Steve on integration work in terms of IT infrastructure. So, to Daniel's point here, the landscape has changed pretty dramatically over the last few years. Right, it used to be more of a traditional companies, going from on-prem servers to other on-prem servers, kind of the traditional IT you would think of. And now a lot more customers are rolling out cloud services, cloud infrastructure. And when you do IT due diligence, you need to think about all of those various scenarios. What I mean by this is you're not only worrying about the on-prem side of things, you're also worrying about the cloud side of things, and you got to really have a deep understanding of the two different types of technologies, right? We've seen that a lot of companies are more familiar with the on-premises technologies. You've got other companies more familiar with the latest and greatest from the cloud. But in order to kind of run those projects successfully, you really need to have deep expertise in both, right? Which we call hybrid, which is a combination of on-prem and cloud. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges typically with those migrations, but in terms of getting those projects to the finish line, it's very important not to take shortcuts during the IT due diligence, right? We really emphasize the process. So we can make sure we understand all the potential risk for those types of projects, and we can basically define the roadmap based off of the findings from the due diligence.
Yeah, that's great, Max. So as prior to getting to a merger or an acquisition being official and getting the deal closed, what are the steps that should be taken prior to that point, and how do you plan for this process of post diligence and into the integration phase?
Yeah, so I think that during due diligence, as part of the due diligence process, it is critical to look at the target's company infrastructure, right? To make sure you are able to document the infrastructure, understand the process around maintaining that infrastructure, the world we live in with almost daily threats out there from a cybersecurity standpoint, to look at not only the infrastructure, but how it's being protected, right? The worst thing that can happen is you acquire an organization, and within months of acquisition, there's a breach, right? So making sure that not only you look and understand the landscape, but you understand the process to maintain and to secure that infrastructure. And once you have established this landscape, we call it sort of the current state or the documentation of infrastructure, process, business applications, content and data being managed. At that point, you can start planning on how you're going to integrate the companies post acquisition.
And so what are some of the more often overlooked challenges from an IT perspective during this M&A process, both before and after?
That's a great question. And I think that, it's one thing to understand what's out there. It's one other thing to understand the scale of the data, right? I mean, we live in a world that's creating a huge amount of data every day. And I think that every organization is sitting on a huge amount of data, right? And, data is capital, right? Data is your intellectual property, right? That's what you're acquiring, right? It's often stored into a computer system. And, once you have a landscape, I think one thing that people overlook is how much data is out there, because the size and the scale of the data stored in those computer or information system would determine the pace and the complexity of any migration, right? If you just take email, for instance, and I know, Max, you've done quite a bit of email migration, understanding, hey, you're going to have to integrate your email system, right? And potentially migrate if you're retaining years of emails, and just having a good understanding of the size, right? That Max and sort of the scale of what is it going to take to migrate, and integrate your email system. That's just one piece of the equation, of course, but that's one that we see a lot. So I think size and scale is very often overlooked.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess what are some of the other projects and challenges, email being one you mentioned, Daniel, what are some of the other projects to consider?
The bigger one, and Max, you're gonna talk more about that, I'm sure, because you're recently been engaged in a project that involved, every company has a directory of people, right? And in the world of technology, we call that identity management. Every company has a way to manage identity of employees or vendors or customer outside of the organization. And when you want to integrate your organization, you have to start first integrating the directory, Max, right? So tell us some example of some of the challenge you've seen from an identity management.
No, you're absolutely correct, Daniel, right? Identity is key for those types of migrations, right? You're coming in from multiple systems, right? What we call the legacy companies, and you're traditionally merging into a single entity. So everybody has their own account. That account has access to various applications, whether that's emails, whether that's access to a file share, things like that. And now you need to make sure that everybody gets a unified identity to access the new platform and the new system. So there's a lot of technical challenges with that. And the very first thing you need to do is make sure you set up some sort of coexistence, right? So on day one, you're really not going to have that unified scenario. That's going to be your end result. But at first, when you start those M&A types of projects, you need to make sure that, of course, all the various employees can talk to each other across organizations. You need to make sure you minimize the user impact as well during the process. So by setting up coexistence, let's say between various email organizations, so exchange to exchange, you're going to be able to, let's say, share calendars across employees and organizations. You're also going to be able to, merge, let's say, global address lists, right? So when you're sending an email to someone who's part of the previous organization, you're going to be able to find that record or that user record in your directory. So that's going to help with the collaboration at first, during the beginning of the project. Ultimately, again, your goal may be more about kind of merging everything into like a single platform, and that's where the migration is going to take into effect, basically.
Yeah, so identity is a big project, often overlooked and not a top priority. I think Max, you brought some great points about coexistence, right? You want to be able day one of the acquisition to be able to live together separately, still as one organization, but with two separate IT organizations in that coexistence mode, and then start moving things at the pace that makes sense, right? We've seen acquisition where the pace of migration was extremely fast. The acquiring company had 2 weeks to migrate, right? Where Max, you've been in a project where 3 years later they will start cleaning up the mess, right? They were still working multiple identity, and people didn't know where to log in, and they had multiple accounts, and things were just not thought about. And from an employee standpoint, if you don't think about those things, as either acquiring or acquired company, it's not fun, right? You want to remove the barrier of productivity, and technology has to be worked on. Other things, of course, email, collaboration system, files, business systems, reporting systems, databases, all of those things have to be considered post-migration, and thought about it during the M&A process, but of course worked on post acquisition.
Yeah, those are all great points, Max and Daniel. And let's talk for a minute about when you're coming from the two different technologies, two different platforms that companies are using. Talk about some of the unique challenges there and solutions for that.
Yeah, as consultants, we wish everyone was on the same system, so it will make our life easier when we have to integrate and migrate. And there's been, over the last 5 years, massive migration to the cloud. So people are in constant migration mode, right? Either just because they're moving from this to this, or because they're acquiring company. And I think we're seeing more and more needs to move from one cloud to another one, either in the same cloud or across cloud. And, frankly, when you think about the big cloud provider, Google, AWS, Microsoft, they didn't think that people will have to move from one point A to point B, right? They always felt like, hey, I'm in the cloud, you're in the cloud. Well, guess what? Company get acquired and company moves and there's a need, and I think that there's a lack of tool set to do that, right? So it's not easy. So we've seen, some organization moving from, an acquired company on a G Suite moving to Microsoft 365, right? So we've seen the other way around too, right? And I think that you need to determine, almost which of the cloud system will win, right? If you're using Slack or Teams, what are you going to use, right? And then you need to assess how you're going to migrate. So Max, I don't know if you have example of, things you've seen moving from, different, areas from point A to point B.
Yeah, no, to your point, Daniel, I mean, it's always, something that easier when you go from, let's say, Microsoft to Microsoft. It's they have a lot of native integration points. It makes a project, smoother in terms of that process. However, and we've done a lot of integrations with Google as well, right? So with Google, you can do some coexistence with Microsoft. It's not native like it is with Microsoft, but you have capabilities to do that as well. So we do always, find solutions to set up that coexistence. There's a lot of third-party tools out there that also try to bridge that gap. On the Microsoft side of things, I want to say, Microsoft has been trying to add more capabilities to their cloud systems to help companies merge into their own system, right? They've added some free capabilities actually for the email scenario, for example, where you can bring emails from Google Mail over to Office 365. So now you don't have to to invest in like a third-party tool for that process, for example. So, we're seeing a lot more integration work, and I do think that Microsoft and Google, all those vendors are starting to add more capabilities to kind of ease that process, basically.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, I think for our final topic, and this may be a brief discussion on something that'll turn into another episode of the Capital Table, because certainly not a small topic to talk about IT integration, but as you look at the deals you worked on, Max and Daniel, I mean, what do you see as some of the main challenges as you worked on those projects? And again, I think what the appetite of our listeners, because I think this is a topic we can explore further.
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges, and I'm going to illustrate that. I'm not going to name the companies, but I'm going to illustrate that with a good example. We worked with a spin-off of a large hotel company who was spinning off their real estate division to a new company. And they had an agreement of use of certain information system and access to certain data, right? So that was part of the agreement, Steve, and negotiated and blah, blah, blah. So they came in and said, okay, let's get started. We're in the new company now. We have access to all of that data. Nevertheless, they realized 2 or 3 weeks into the new organization that they did not plan for certain data set to be transitioned over. Right, and now we're talking a massive organization with a lot of process, lots of legal aspect, and essentially it took them months to renegotiate the buy agreement, right, or the selling agreement to get access to some data that they should have gotten access with, right, because of that spinoff, right. So that is an example. So, too many people feel like, what, I'm spinning it off, I'm being bought, and things are not carrying over, right? So that's an example of a spin-off. But, if in the case of a pure acquisition, I think not getting a great understanding or full picture of the IT technology is so such a common scenario, right? I think people rush and spend a lot of time doing financial, and Steve, you're in that every day. Tremendous amount of data and Excel modeling, and we got all the finance worked out, right? So we understand everything, but they're not putting the same amount of effort in technology, which is really, really driven those organizations where, without that proper planning, they're not able to properly, operate, right? And I think company will spend more time in thinking about, technology like an asset, right? And a very important asset and model plan, what are we going to do? And before we close the deal, we should already have some sort of a plan that, within 90 days, 120, 180 days, we're going to accomplish those things. We're going to need those kind of resources. For instance, as a company being acquired, if I have vendor relationship, make sure those relationships are secure post-acquisition, right? That you can have you can have the help from your third-party vendors in order to continue and perform that migration. The other thing that we've seen quite a bit is misunderstanding or not understanding the impact that the acquisition will have with the end users' day-to-day work, right? So, hey, you're making an acquisition, you bring over new employees, but guess what? Some people will have to help, right, assist. And, many organizations don't see that, don't plan about that impact, right? We're going to need more help desk. We're going to need more engineering. We're going to need more people in HR to help and more resources to help for that transition. And frankly, when you think about the potential impact, you see a lot of people or employees leaving a company being acquired just because it's chaotic, right? It's too chaotic. People didn't think about this. I can't access my system. I can't get to my email. Can't find those old files. So people make quick conclusion. Max, I'm sure you've seen other things, as the latest project you were in, sort of doing the cleanup. What are those other things that are often overlooked?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Daniel. So I would say, over the last, year or so, the main challenge I've experienced with those M&A projects is the remote workforce due to the pandemic, right? So, as you know, M&A acquisition work and integration can be a complex project in a traditional world, but with that remote workforce, that added another layer of complexity around those engagements, right? Now you had to worry, or you still have to worry about your users connecting from home, using personal devices, personal laptops coming in from various angles, various locations, and of course that has an impact with the integration projects that we're running for our customers. Right? Is there a VPN into play to connect back to the on-premises documents, for example? Has cloud been deployed, right, so that users can access their documents and their data seamlessly from any location? So again, now that we have that new scenario where everybody is working from various locations, that's a challenge that we're working through it. There are solutions out there, but again, it needs to be planned from the very beginning. It's not something like that you got to pick up along the way. It really has to be designed that way from the beginning to ensure a successful project. And Daniel also mentioned the user experience. To me, I'm a technical architect. I focus on the back end side of things, but I really also value the user experience. To me, a project cannot be successful if users cannot connect easily to their systems after the migration. So I always focus on making sure we do enough testing. We involve test users and pilot users into our process to get some feedback and make sure it's going as smooth as possible for the employees, basically.
Yeah, that's great, Max. Thank you. And Daniel and Max, what a great discussion about the high level of the key IT issues in an M&A transaction. As we all said at the top of this discussion, there's certainly a lot to discover as you're going through the process of due diligence, but most importantly, leading towards the important parts of making the deal successful afterwards in the integration phase. So again, I think we'll pick that topic up on another episode of the Capital Table. Thank you both for your time today, and for everyone out there, we look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
You've been listening to the Capital Table. For more information, please visit withum.com. Thank you for listening.